Good afternoon, everybody. Can anyone hear me? Can you see my screen? Please let me know.
Yeah, we can hear you. See your
Oh,
screen.
all right. Thank you. Please ensure you update your device name. That's very, very important. By now, we should all get used to that. Once again, good afternoon, everybody, and I hope you're having a great day. Today, we're looking at section 4.2, Windows PowerShell. And in this section, our key terms are alias, commandlets, objects, piping, provider, script, Windows management instrumentation known as WMI. And our learning goals for this section, section 4.2, Windows PowerShell, are to describe how the PowerShell uses the object model, to use the advanced PowerShell commands to create a PowerShell script. PowerShell, it has become so important in today's world, especially when we look at Windows platform. So it's only applicable within the Windows, the Microsoft Windows operating system. PowerShell basics. PowerShell is a powerful command line shell integrated with the Windows NT technology. Windows.NET technology is a platform that developers use for building apps. PowerShell treats everything as an object. And what is an object? An object is a self-contained resources that stores information about itself in properties and provides the program code that can be used to interact with it. This is what the last statement I just read, this is what it means. As you can see within the object, there are two items. You have the properties and you have the method. The property is the data about the object, such as the name, the handle, the time code, the status, etc. Each object has its own properties. Methods. For methods, these are procedures that can access and alter the data fields, that is, the properties such as start, stop, refresh, and the execute command. PowerShell consider a service as an object, and this is actually embedded in the service object are data. We have properties and methods, which is what I mentioned earlier on. Properties are each piece of data in the object. Methods are the action that can be performed on the data. Please take note. Properties are each piece of the data in an object or in the object, while methods are the actions that can be performed on the data. Output from the command.ex is a text, which is the commandlets. PowerShell output may look like a text, but it is actually an object. And when you talk about piping, this is a process of sending output result from one command into another. As previously suggested, I'm also going to suggest that you go online and you look for PowerShell commands cheat sheet. There are so many out there that you can come across, especially if you do a Google search. It is important that you have this cheat sheet. And again, the reason is because if you are not working with it day in, day out, or if you're not working in an environment that requires you to issue PowerShell command, you're bound not to remember. So again, just to have it as your reference, it's important that, just do a Google search on PowerShell commands cheat sheet. You have the commandlets. This is a program inside the PowerShell. There are over 100 commandlets in the PowerShell. These are not, the commandlets are not case sensitive. CMD, which is commands in the PowerShell, are actually replaced with the commandlet equivalents, meaning that in the world of CLI, you use commands like we saw in the last class, but in the PowerShell environment, it is actually referred to as the commandlets. Alias, this is a replacement way to enter a command. And here are some of the keys that you can use on the keyboard and its function. And I'm just going to briefly touch on the first three. You have the page up, which jumps to the first command in the history buffer. And these keys are actually used when you are actually in the commandlet and you are trying to navigate. Instead of you retyping, you can use the page up key or page down key. For the page down key, this jumps to the last command in the history buffer. The arrow up, the up arrow rather, this jumps back one command in the history buffer, meaning that any command or any commandlet that you've issued while you're working within the PowerShell environment is actually in the history buffer, meaning that if you don't close that environment, the PowerShell environment, those history buffer will still be there. And then you can use your page up or page down arrow up or up arrow or down arrow. PowerShell commandlets use verb and noun syntax. The command is a verb or an action, which is what is being acted upon. What is being acted upon is actually the noun. For example, get -child item. In this example, get is the verb and the child item is the noun, meaning that the get is the action and the child item is what the action is being acted upon. Just like in CLI, PowerShell also has its own help syntax. In order for you to get the help syntax, you can use the get-help, the commandlet, which is actually used to display help. And you need to enter that, the name of the commandlet. Example, get-help space get-service. That commandlet will actually display help for the get service commandlet. Expanded help files no longer included in the PowerShell. Expanded help files can be accessed using the -online switch and can be downloaded to the computer using the update -help commandlet. And on this page, we could see the PowerShell environment. We could also see the name of the user, and the user actually issued the commandlet get-help space get-service, and that actually brought out some information, get the name, get-service, the syntax that goes along with that, and the alias as well as the remarks. PowerShell, advanced PowerShell command options. PowerShell offers has enormous abilities to manage local and remote systems. This includes many commands to aid in networking, security, Hyper-V virtualization, and Active Directory management. Provider. This is a layer in the PowerShell that allows you to focus on managing a specific data store using the same commands. PowerShell also gives you the ability to manage other environments. In the file system, running the get-child item commandlet, this actually displays files. In the Active Directory provider, issuing the commandlet get-child item commandlet, this actually displays user objects. Different providers allows access to different information store. Issuing the commandlet get-ps provider commandlet, this actually displays the providers installed on a system. And on this next screen, we can see the providers, the list of providers, the names, the capabilities, as well as the drivers. Each provider has a shortcut to its environment. In output for the get-ps provider commandlet, drive columns indicate the shortcut for the provider. If I go back one step, we can see on the right of the screen, we can see the different drivers that actually provides the shortcut. Similar, and this is very similar to when you issue the command dir, which is directory. Here is another example of the commandlet get-child item. We could see the mode, we could see the last write time, the length, as well as the name. Get-net IP address commandlet. This actually displays the computer's IP address, and the computer's IP address is often the private or private mapped to the public, depending on which IP address that the computer has been assigned. Format-table commandlet, this actually displays information in the column format. Get-wmi object commandlet, this displays information about hardware that are installed on the computer. Windows management instrumentation. This is an infrastructure in Windows for managing data and operations. And here are the different classes and the meaning. For example, Win32_computer system. This means properties that are related to the computer running Windows. Win32_environment, this is a system environmental variables. So each class has its own meaning. Photo filter objects, you can photo filter object according to specifications. Where underscore object commandlet, this will actually display the stop services. Remember, just like we have the commands that we need to issue when we were dealing with CLI, when we previously talked about CLI, these also in PowerShell, there's also commandlets that actually, helps you to see the services that are started and the services that are, have stopped. Analyze object based on condition. In order to analyze object based on condition, you need to issue the commandlet get -service space, the pipe space where -object bracket open the $_ dot status space equals stop bracket close. And what does this command do? This will show you only object whose status equals stop, meaning services that have been stopped. And here are the different operators and its meaning. This, again, cannot be overemphasized. This is why I mentioned earlier on, go online, do a search for PowerShell commands cheat sheet, and you get that. You see tons of the different commands that are actually supported within the PowerShell commands. Next is PowerShell scripts. PowerShell does not use batch files. We saw how to use batch files when we were talking about the command line interface, but in PowerShell, it doesn't use batch files. Commands are actually placed in scripts. And what is a script? This is a listing of command shell commands, PowerShell commands, and the options that will be processed in order, meaning it processes those scripts in that order. And this is created using a notepad or any plain text editor. And then you have to save it with the file extension .ps1 file extension. And in order for you to run that script, you need to enter the period / space and the name of the script. Get -execution policy commandlet. This actually determines the current status of the PowerShell environment. Restricted, if you add that word restricted to that command, this is no script can be run. If you add all signed to that command, this means only script signed by a publisher can be run. If you had remote signed, it means that downloaded script must be signed by a trusted publisher. And if you add unrestricted, meaning you issue the commandlet get -execution policy space unrestricted, this is a no restriction, all PowerShell script will run. Set -execution policy commandlet is actually used to change the policy. For example, set -execution policy space all signed will change it to that policy. Before it is changed, you will be prompted to either accept or reject the change, as we can see in this example on our screen. The user issued a command set -execution policy space all signed. So the execution policy is actually asking a question: execution policy change? the execution policy helps protect you from scripts that you do not trust. And this is why, you know, for people who are unethical, they can easily, send you, a malicious script. And once they issue it alongside with this command and you accept it, and that's it, that system becomes vulnerable. So again, before you change the execution policy, make sure is what you want to do and make sure it's actually in line. And on this note, we've come to the end of section 4.2, and we will go through review questions. Question 1, how is the syntax of PowerShell commandlet constructed? How is the syntax of the PowerShell commandlet constructed? Any volunteer? Any volunteer?
Yes, Patrick.
Go ahead, please.
A verb together with a noun.
Correct. A verb and a noun. And the verb is the action, and the noun is what is being acted upon. Correct. Question 2. When a command line or Linux command is run in PowerShell, what type of command is it? When a command line or a Linux command is run in PowerShell, what type of command is it? Any volunteer? Anybody? Any volunteer? Any volunteer? Okay, since there's no volunteer, it's actually referred to as alias. 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 Question 3. How would you get additional help from the get-process commandlets? How would you get additional help for the get-process commandlet in a PowerShell? Any volunteer? Any volunteer?
Yes, this is Patrick. I would use the get help and then pipe get process commandlet.
Okay, well, you don't need to add the pipe. All you need to issue is get help, space, get process. There's no piping. But that was a good attempt. Thank you. Question 4. Which commandlet displays the properties and methods of an object? Which commandlet displays the properties and methods of an object? Any volunteer? Anybody? Okay, that's the get-member, get member. That's the commandlet that actually displays the properties and methods of an object. Question 5, which is the final question. What is the file extension for saved PowerShell script? What is the file extension for the saved PowerShell script? Any volunteer? Anybody?
Yes, Patrick again.
Go ahead, please.
.ps1.
Correct. The PS1. The PS1. Any question with regards to the PowerShell command before we look at the final and the third section in chapter 4? Any question? Okay, then let's proceed. In this section, section 4.3, which is the third and the final section in chapter 4, we're going to be looking at introduction to Linux. And Linux has different distros, different distribution. You have Red Hat, you have Mandrake, you have SUSE, you have Ubuntu, and it's on and on and on because it's an open source. In this section, our key terms are command language interpreter, distro, forked, free and open source software, hard link, home directory, inode number, Linux, man page, and symbolic link. Our learning goals in this section is 1, to describe the Linux operating system, 2, to compare and contrast the Linux shell to the Windows command line, to use Linux commands, and the fourth one is to explain how to view command help in Linux. Linux overview. What is Linux? Linux is an open source computer operating system that is actually derived from Unix operating system. Unix operating system. An example of Unix operating system is the Sun Solaris, and that is no longer in use or not as common as Linux, different distros. What is a fork? This is a program that has been modified to create a new development branch as a separate program. You can actually get the source code of any of the distros, and then you build it and improve upon it, and add some more capabilities to it. Free and open source software. What is FOSS? This is a software whose source code is not locked and can be modified by anyone. The iOS has its source code locked. That is why that's the Apple iOS. It's actually a distro of Linux, meaning the source code for the iOS was actually taken from one of the open source codes, but it was then locked down, built, modified, and locked down only for the iOS platform, which is why some of the commands that you can run on the Linux distro, you can also run it on an iOS operating device, or iOS installed iOS devices. Linux is a license under the GNU project, meaning users can run GNU software, share it, study and review its code, and modify it. Users can also adapt and use their own version of Linux. Distros, this is a specific version of Linux. There are hundreds of Linux distros available out there. Some of the names I mentioned are some of the Linux distros available. And these distros were actually, they've been adapted for specific purposes in users. Good example of another popular distro is Kali Linux. Kali Linux is still an open source, but again, it also contains some of the tools that that you can use for vulnerability assessment, penetration testing, that you don't actually require paid licenses for. Linux shell. What is a Linux shell? Linux actually has what is called a graphic user interface, which is GUI. This can vary from distro to distro, and it also comes with a command line interface. These are the two options that you have if you want to install, manage, operate any Linux distros. And the CLI provides more like a common interface. The command language interpreter, this actually executes command from direct keyboard entry or a program. The command line environment is the shell. Through it, users can actually interact with the operating system. Bash shell, also known as Bourne Again shell, is found in most Linux distros. The command line prompt actually reflects your login name and a symbol. The # indicates that user is a super user with root privileges, more like what we call super admin in Windows. The $, means user is a regular user. So that's how you're able to differentiate if you are a regular user or a super user. A super user has those root privileges, meaning that a super user can, do and undo. He or she can actually create other users, can, grant other users a privilege because of the super user privileges and rights. On this screen is an example that shows the # and the $, to actually indicate the regular user as well as the super user. Who can tell me by looking at this screen, who can tell me which distro of Linux is actually being displayed here? Any volunteer? Which distro of Linux is actually being displayed on the screen right now? Any volunteer?
Is it the Raspberry Pi?
Your name, please.
Patrick.
Go ahead.
Raspberry Pi.
No, it's not the Raspberry Pi. It's actually Debian. But that was a good attempt. It's the Debian. What is actually built for is being used as Raspberry, meaning that the Debian opens or Debian is one of the distros, and that's why you could see it clearly reading there, Debian. But the objective is that it's being used as the Raspberry Pi. Linux commands, we have the home directory. This is where you store your personal files. The home directory, most home directory have that path /home /the username. The shell interface of home directory is case sensitive. You see the path with the pwd command, which stands for print working directory. To change the directory where you are located, you use the cd command, which means change directory command. You insert a space after the command and before the home directory. And here's an example of the print working directory. Now, if this user needs to change his or her name, all they need to do is just issue that command, change directory, as in cd, and it changes directory. Here are also some of the other commands, as well as their description. This you will get much more if you go online. As earlier mentioned, go online, go and search for Linux cheat sheet. Now remember, because of the different distros, most of the commands most of the basic commands, let me put it that way, will work, but there are some commands that may not work, which are particular to some distros. Viewing files and directories. To view the files in a directory, you use the ls command, which is the short form of list. If you add a switch, or you can add a switch or switches to it to increase the functionality of that command. And here is an example of the list command. You could see the user issuing that command ls, and it lists all the directory. Again, you can add switches, or there are different types of switches that you can add to that command to make it more, to increase its functionality. It may not be obvious what the information represents when you run the ls command. The total number of files at the top of the list. The first character in the file specifies the file type. There are, fields 1 to 7. And what that means is this, as you can see, there are fields 1 to 7. The field 1 is the type of file. Field 2, the next field represents the permission for the user. The user can either have read, write, or execute. The next one is the permissions for the group. Follow that, the next field that follows that is the permission for the world, links to file, the owner of the file, the group of the file, the size of the file, the last date that file was modified, and the file name. So these are just, the different fields. Links, there's what is called inode number. What is an inode number? This corresponds to the location of the file's contents. This allows you to work with a single file, but have access via different files. If you change data in one file, it will change in the linked file. Now, there are two types. You have the hard link and the symbolic link. The hard link points directly to the original data, while the symbolic link is a link made to another link, not directly to the original data. In command, create both kinds of links, and to create the hard link, you issue the command in space file1 space file2. To create this symbolic link, you need to add the -s switch as follows: in space -s space file1 and file2. And here is the slide explaining how the hard link is actually linked to the original, and how the symbolic link, is indirectly linked to the original data. Linux help and command execution options. Most Linux commands provide help on the command and the switches. If you add -help switch, this will actually displays the help. Example, ls space -help will actually provide help on the list command. Help and the name of the shell command to actually view additional help. Man page. What is a man page? This is a formal piece of documentation in Linux providing help. This is actually called a manual. Viewing these using the man command, and to exit or quit the man page, you press the Q key, which is quit key. And here's an example of the man page. We could see the list of the different, it's like a manual, reading, it's like you're reading a manual for that particular Linux distro. Piping, this is used the same way as Windows commands and PowerShell prompts. This symbol tells the Linux to send the output of one command to another. For example, send the output from the list to the NL, meaning if you issue the command ls space piping or pipe space NL, this creates a list using the ls command and then sends it to the NL command to create the numbered list. Head and tail commands can be used to limit the view of an output. When you issue the head command, this actually displays the first part of the file. When you issue the tail command, this displays the last part of the file. The -n switch for either command is actually used to specify the number of lines to display. By default, it displays 10 lines. And here is an example of the head and the tail commands. As you can see in this example, the user issued that command list space pipe space tail space -n, meaning that it should just list the last 5 lines, and that's why you could see the last 5 lines that is being displayed. grep, there's a command called grep. And what is a grep? The grep command is a utility for searching for plain text data. The grep command is useful for printing lines from a file or input streams that match an expression. For example, if you issue the command grep space linda space /etc/password, these actually retrieves all files in the password subdirectory in the etc directory that contains the word Linda. And those are the words are actually listed. Viewing running processes. A process or a running program can be viewed with the command known as PS command. Each process has a unique identifier called a process ID, which is also referred to as PID. Add the -U switch to see the information. Top command is even much more detailed than the PS command. And in this example, we can see the PS command that is being issued. We can see the PID, that's the process ID. Now, if you issue the top command, that it will even give you a much more detail. And on this note, we've come to the end of section 4.3, and we will go through our review questions. Question 1, different versions of Linux are referred to as what? Different versions of Linux are referred to as what? Any volunteer? Any volunteer? What are the different versions of Linux called?
Yes, Patrick.
Go ahead, please.
The distro.
Correct. Distros or distributions. Question 2, on a Linux system, how can you determine if you are logged in with super user rights? How can you determine if you are logged in with a super user rights? Any volunteer? Any volunteer?
You see the pound sign by
I can't hear you, please. Your name?
you see Andrew,
Okay, go ahead.
the pound sign.
The pound sign. Yeah, the prompt will begin with a pound sign, correct. Question 3. What is the purpose of the CD command in Linux? What is the purpose of the CD command in Linux? Any volunteer?
Yes,
Yeah.
it's to change the current directory.
Correct. Yeah, your name, please.
Siriana.
Correct. Is to actually change the directory that you are in. If you are in the home directory and you want to go to another directory, you have to issue that command. Question 4. Creating a hard link to a file is done with which Linux command? Meaning, how do you create a hard link to a file in Linux? What command are you going to issue or type? Any volunteer? Any volunteer?
Can I come again, Patrick?
Go ahead, please.
The in command.
In command, correct. Question 5. What would you enter in Linux to search the text output of the ifconfig command for the word link? Meaning that which command would you type or issue if you want to search for the word link from the text output of the if command? Any volunteer? Anybody? You actually issue the command ifconfig space the pipe space grep space the word link. So, any question on this section before we wrap up today's class? Any question? Question. Okay, if there's no question, please stay online while I go through the roll call. Please note that if you are actually marked absent for today's class, that's your fault. The reason being that you actually failed to listen to simple instruction. I can still see, somebody logging in with iPhone from my end, and I could also see another user logged in just with his or her first name or probably his or her last name. There's no way I can figure that out if you've attended the class. So if you are this individual, please ensure you update your device right away. Otherwise, there's no way I will be able to mark you present for today's class. So please stay online while I go through the roll call. Thank you. Question. Before I wrap up today's class, any question? Please be on the lookout for the quiz for chapter 4. It's going to be published tomorrow. And, as always, ensure you attempt it. It's going to be on, it's going to be valid for the next 1 week from the date it was published on the Canvas. So please make sure you be on the lookout for it, and please make sure you attempt it. So in the absence of no other question, we've actually come to the end of today's class. Do have a great evening, stay safe, and bye for now.